Jake listened as Veltar continued his story. The alien's voice grew more intense as he remembered the danger they had all faced that day. "We were about halfway back to your base when everything changed," Veltar said. "I was lying on the stretcher, drifting in and out of consciousness. Your medic was giving me something for the pain. Then we heard the sound." Jake remembered that sound. It had been like thunder, but it came from above. The roar of Catherian engines searching the sky. "Search?" "Ships," Jake said quietly. "Your people were looking for you." "Yes," Veltar nodded. 3 heavy fighters and a command ship. They had been searching for me since my ship went down. I could hear them calling my name on the radio frequency. Jake could see it all in his mind now. The red canyon where they had been walking. The narrow path between the rocks. The way Danny Walsh had looked up at the sky with fear in his eyes when the ships appeared. "We had to hide," Jake said. "The canyon had some deep caves. We carried you into one of them." Veltar's eyes grew distant. "I remember the darkness of that cave. I remember the cold stone against my back. But most of all, I remember the argument your team had about what to do with me." Jake felt uncomfortable. That argument had been one of the hardest moments of his military career. His team had been split down the middle, and he had been caught in between. "Danny wanted to leave you there," Jake said. "He said the search ships would find us if we stayed with you." "You was right to be afraid," Veltar said. "If my people had found you with me, they would have killed you all. No questions asked. That was how the war was fought then." Jake remembered. Crouching in the cave, listening to the sound of engines getting closer. Danny Walsh had been pacing back and forth, his rifle clutched in his hands. Lisa Grant had been kneeling beside Veltar, checking his wounds by flashlight. "Sarge, we need to move," Danny had said. "Those ships are getting closer. If we leave the alien here, we can make it back to base. If we try to carry him, we are all dead." Jake had understood Danny's fear. The young corporal had a wife and a baby daughter back on Earth. He had joined the military to make money for his family, not to die on some alien world. Lisa disagreed with Danny, Jake said to Veltar. "She said we could not abandon a wounded prisoner." "Your medic was brave," Veltar said. "She stood up to your corporal, even though he was angry. She said that leaving me would be wrong." Jake could see Lisa's face in his memory. She had been calm but determined. "We do not leave wounded people behind," she had said. "That is not who we are." But Danny was not convinced, Jake said. "He said we had to think about the mission." "About getting back alive," Veltar nodded. "I could understand some of what they were saying. I knew they were arguing about me. I tried to tell them to leave me, but I was too weak to speak clearly." Jake remembered the moment when everything had changed. They had been hiding in the cave for almost an hour. The search ships kept circling overhead, getting closer each time. Then Jake's radio had crackled to life. "Base Alpha to Patrol 7. The voice had said, "We are tracking multiple enemy contacts in your area. What is your status?" Jake had looked at his team. Danny was staring at him with desperate eyes. Lisa was still working on Veltar's wounds. The alien was watching them all, trying to understand what was happening. "I had to make a choice," Jake said to Veltar. "I could report that we had found nothing and try to get back to base. Or I could tell them about you and risk everything. What did you choose?" Veltar asked. Even though he already knew the answer, Jake took a deep breath. "I told them we had found a wounded enemy pilot. I said we were bringing him back for medical treatment and questioning." Veltar smiled. "I remember hearing you say those words. Even though I was hurt and scared, I felt something I had never felt before. I felt hope." But Jake also remembered what had happened next. Danny Walsh had exploded with anger. "Are you crazy, Sarge?" Danny had shouted. "You just told them we have an enemy soldier with us. Now they expect us to bring him back. We cannot change our minds." Jake had felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders. Every decision he made would affect his team's chances of survival. Danny was right. Jake said to Veltar. Once I reported you, we were committed. We had to get you back to base alive, or my career was over. But that was not why you did it. Veltar said, You did not make that choice for your career. You made it because you believed it was right. Jake nodded slowly. Lisa supported me. She said we were doing the right thing. But Danny was furious. He said I was risking all our lives for one enemy soldier. I remember your corporal's anger. Veltar said. Even though I could not understand all his words, I could see how upset he was. He kept pointing at me and then at the cave entrance. Jake remembered trying to calm Danny down. The young man had been shaking with fear and rage. Sarge, those ships out there are not playing games, Danny had said. If they find us, they will. Kill us all. My daughter will grow up without a father because you wanted to save one alien. How did you convince him to help? Veltar asked Dot Jake thought about that moment. It had been one of the hardest conversations of his life. I did not convince him, Jake said. I ordered him. I told him that as long as I was in command, we would not abandon a wounded prisoner. I said that if he could not follow that order, I would have him court-martialed when we got back. Veltar's eyes widened. You threatened your own soldier to protect me? I had to, Jake said. Danny was a good man, but he was scared. Fear makes people do things they normally would not do. I needed him to focus on the mission, not on his fear. What did he say? Jake smiled sadly. He said, Yes, sir. But if we all die out here, I am going to haunt you forever. Then he picked up his end of the stretcher and got ready to move. Veltar laughed, a sound like gravel rolling down a hill. I liked your corporal, even though he wanted to leave me. He was honest about his feelings. Danny was always honest, Jake said. Sometimes. Too honest. But he was also loyal. Once he accepted the order, he never complained again. What happened next? Veltar asked. Jake's expression grew serious. The hard part. We had to get you back to base while those search ships were hunting for us. And we had just received word that more enemy forces were on the way. I remember you explaining the situation to your team, Veltar said. You said we would have to move fast and stay hidden. You said it would be dangerous. Jake nodded. Lisa was worried about moving you. She said the journey might kill you if we went too fast. But staying in the cave would definitely kill us all. So you chose to risk my life to save everyone, Veltar said, including me. It was the only choice that made sense, Jake said. We had to move before the search pattern tightened around us. Veltar was quiet for a moment. I remember you kneeling beside me before we left the cave. You looked into my eyes and said something in your language. I did not understand the words, but I understood the meaning. Jake felt his throat tighten. He remembered that moment clearly. The alien had looked so young and scared. I told you that we would get you home safely. I promised. You promised, Veltar repeated. A human soldier promised to save the life of an enemy warrior. At that moment, I began to understand that everything I had been taught about humans was wrong. What had you been taught? Jake asked. That humans were cruel and heartless, Veltar said. That they cared only for themselves and their own kind. That they would kill anyone who stood in their way. But here you were, risking your life and the lives of your team to save someone who was supposed to be your enemy. Jake felt uncomfortable with the praise. I was just doing what any decent person would do. No, Veltar said firmly. Many people would have left me in that cave. Many people would have chosen the safe path. You chose the hard path because it was the right path. That is what made you different. That is what made you human. The alien looked out at the stars again. When we left that cave, I knew that whatever happened next, my life had already been changed forever. I had seen what humans could be at their best. I had seen compassion in the middle of war. I had seen hope where there should have been only fear. Jake watched Veltar's face as he spoke. The alien's eyes held a mixture of gratitude and sadness. "What happened during the journey back?" Jake asked. Veltar turned back to him. "That is when the real test began. That is when you showed me what it truly means to be human." Veltar's voice grew soft as he began his story. Jake listened, watching the alien's face change as old memories came back to life. 15 years ago, I was not an ambassador, Veltar said. I was a young warrior, barely 20 years old by your count. My name then was Veltar Orc, which means sharp blade in our language. I thought I knew everything about war and honor. I was wrong. Jake found himself leaning closer. Something about Veltar's words felt familiar, like an old song he had heard. Long ago, the world you call Kepler 442b was rich in crystals that powered our ships, Veltar continued. But humans have built a colony there. They were taking the crystals from the ground. My people said this was theft. Your people said it was their right. Both sides were angry, Jake nodded. He remembered that world. It had been a hard place to live. The days were too hot and the nights were too cold. The ground was red and dusty, and the air tasted of metal. But the crystals there were worth more than gold. I was part of a scouting unit, Veltar said. We flew small, fast ships. Our job was to watch the human settlements and report back to our commanders. It was supposed to be safe work. We were not supposed to fight. Veltar paused and looked out at the stars. I was flying alone that day. My ship was new, and I wanted to test how fast it could go. I was young and foolish. I flew too close to the human base. Jake felt a chill run down his back. He was starting to remember something. A hot day on Kepler 442b, the sound of engines overhead, the crash that changed everything. Your people had weapons that could shoot down our ships, Veltar continued. They called them plasma cannons. When they fired at my ship, it felt like being hit by lightning. My engines failed. My controls stopped working. I was falling from the sky. Veltar closed his eyes, remembering. I tried to land safely, but the ship was too damaged. I crashed into a canyon about 10 miles from your base. The impact was terrible. My ship was broken in half. I was trapped inside, bleeding, and barely alive. Jake's memories were becoming clearer now. He remembered that day 15 years ago. He had been Sergeant Jake Morrison then, not commander. He was 27 years old and thought he knew everything about being a soldier. I was stationed at Forward Base Alpha, Jake said quietly. I remember the crash. We saw the smoke from the base. Veltar opened his eyes and looked at Jake. Yes, you were sent to investigate. You and your team. Jake could see it now in his mind. The red dust, the broken ship, the smoke rising into the pale sky. You remembered his team, Corporal Danny Walsh, who always made jokes even in dangerous situations, and Medic Lisa Grant, who could fix anything from a broken bone to a broken heart. We were on patrol, Jake said. We heard the crash and went to check it out. Orders were to capture any survivors or eliminate them if they resisted. I was not in a condition to resist, Veltar said with a bitter laugh. My left arm was crushed. My leg was broken. I was bleeding from many cuts. When I saw you and your soldiers coming, I thought I was going to die. Jake remembered finding the alien in the wreckage. The young Kitherian had been so different from the warriors he had seen in battle. This one looked scared and hurt, not angry or dangerous. You were trapped under a piece of metal, Jake said. The ship's hull had fallen on you. You were trying to push it off, but you were too weak. I had been trapped for hours, Veltar said. I could feel my strength leaving me. When I saw humans approaching, I expected them to shoot me. Instead, you did something I did not expect. Jake's memory was fully awake now. He could see Danny Walsh pointing his rifle at the alien. He could hear Lisa Grant asking if they should call for backup. He could feel the hot sun on his face and the weight of the decision he had to make. You looked at me, Veltar said. Not like I was an enemy, like I was a person in pain. Then you told your soldiers to help me. Jake remembered Danny's protest. Sarge, we're supposed to take prisoners, not play doctor with the enemy. But Jake had seen something in the alien's eyes. Fear, yes, but also hope. The hope that maybe, just maybe, these humans would not kill him. Danny did not want to help, Jake said. He thought it was against orders. But you overruled him, Veltar. Sai, you told your medic to check my wounds. You told your corporal to help move the metal that was crushing me. You risked your own mission to save the life of an enemy. Jake could see it all clearly now. Lisa Grant kneeling beside the alien, her hands gentle as she examined his injuries. Danny Walsh grumbling as he helped lift the heavy metal beam. The alien's yellow eyes watching them with amazement. You were badly hurt, Jake said. Lisa said you might die if we did not get you medical help soon. I spoke some of your language, Veltar said. Not much, but enough to understand. I heard your medics say that I needed surgery. I heard your corporal say that we should leave me there to die. I heard you say something that I will never forget. Jake felt his throat tighten. He remembered those words. They had come from somewhere deep inside him, from a place he did not even know existed. You said, he is wounded, and that makes him our responsibility. You said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world, like there was no other choice. Jake had said those words, but he had not thought about them much over the years. They had just felt right at the time. Now, sitting here with Veltar, he realized how important they had been. Danny thought I was crazy, Jake said. He kept saying we should follow orders. Take you prisoner or leave you there. But you did not listen to him, Veltar said. You made a choice that went against your military training. You chose to see me as a living being, not just an enemy. Jake remembered the argument with Danny. The young corporal had been scared and angry. He had seen too many human soldiers die fighting Catherians. He could not understand why Jake would risk their lives to save one of them. Lisa agreed with me, Jake said. She said her job was to heal people, not to let them die. Yes, Veltar said. Your medic was kind to me. She spoke softly while she worked on my wounds. She told me that everything would be all right. I did not understand all her words, but I understood her meaning. Jake could picture Lisa's gentle hands cleaning the alien's wounds. She had always been good with scared patients. She had a way of making people feel safe, even in the middle of a war. We had to get you back to base, Jake said, but it was dangerous. There were other Catherian patrols looking for you. I remember. The journey, Veltar said. You and your corporal carried me on a stretcher. Your medic walked beside us, watching my vital signs. Every step was painful, but I was amazed by what you were doing. Jake remembered that long walk back to base. They had to move carefully, staying hidden from enemy scouts. Danny had complained the whole way, but he had never once suggested they abandon their wounded prisoner. You kept asking if I was all right, Veltar said. You gave me water from your own canteen. When I was in too much pain to walk, you carried me yourself. Jake felt a strange mixture of pride and sadness. He was proud of what he had done, but sad that it had taken 15 years for him to understand how important it had been. I was just doing what felt right, Jake said. That is what made it so powerful, Veltar replied. You were not following orders. You were not trying to gain advantage in the war. You were simply being human in the best way possible. Veltar looked out at the stars again. That day changed my life, Commander Morrison. It changed how I saw humans. It changed how I saw war. It changed everything. The space station Harmony Point floated in the darkness between two star systems. Its metal walls gleamed under the light of distant suns. Inside the station, something important was happening. For the first time in history, humans and Catherians were meeting to talk about peace. Commander Jake Morrison walked through the long corridor toward the meeting room. His blue uniform was clean and pressed. His black boots made soft sounds on the metal floor. Jake was 42 years old, with short brown hair and tired eyes. He had seen many battles in his life. Today felt different. Today might change everything. Meeting room was large and round. Half of the seats were made for humans. The other half were bigger, made for the Cytherians. Jake looked at the alien side of the room. The Cytherians were tall, much taller than humans. Their skin was green and covered with small scales. They had long arms and sharp claws. Their eyes were yellow and seemed to glow in the dim light. Jake took his seat at the head of the human delegation. Next to him sat Captain Amy Roberts, a smart woman with red hair who knew many languages. On his other side was Dr. Steve Miller, an old man with gray hair who studied alien cultures. Behind them sat 10 more humans, all chosen for this important meeting. Across the room, the Cytherian delegation was arranging themselves. Their leader was massive, even for a Cytherian. He wore dark armor that covered most of his body. Only his head and hands were visible. His scales were darker than the others, almost black. When he moved, Jake could hear the soft sound of metal against metal. "That is Ambassador Veltar," Captain Roberts whispered to Jake. "He speaks for the Cytherian Empire in this part of space." "We know very little about him," Jake nodded. He had read the files about Veltar, but they did not say much. The Cytherian was a military commander who had become a diplomat. He had fought in many wars against humans. Now he was here to talk about peace. Jake wondered why. The room fell silent as both sides prepared to begin. Jake looked around at his team. They all seemed nervous. Humans have been fighting Cytherians for 20 years. Small battles on frontier worlds, attacks on mining stations, ships destroyed in deep space. Now they were sitting in the same room, trying to find a way to stop the killing. A small robot floated into the center of the room. It began to speak in both human and Cytherian languages. "Welcome to Harmony Point. Today begins the first official peace talks between the human colonial government and the Cytherian Empire. May wisdom guide your words." Jake stood up. It was his turn to speak first. "We come here today not as enemies, but as beings who share the same stars. Humans are new to this part of space. We do not seek war with the Cytherian Empire. We seek understanding." His words were translated into the Cytherian language. Jake watched Veltar's face, but the alien showed no emotion. When Jake finished, Veltar rose from his seat. The Cytherian was so tall that his head almost touched the ceiling. "Humans," Veltar said, his voice deep and rough. "You speak of peace, but your actions show war. You take our worlds. You steal our resources. You kill our people. Why should we trust you?" Jake felt the tension in the room grow stronger. This was not starting well. "We have taken no worlds that belong to you. We have only settled on empty planets. If we have entered your space by mistake, we are willing to discuss boundaries." Veltar's yellow eyes stared at Jake for a long moment. "Empty planets? You call worlds empty when our people have walked on them for thousands of years? You see no value in life that is not like yours." Dr. Miller leaned forward. "Ambassador Veltar, perhaps we can discuss specific incidents. If there have been misunderstandings, we can work to prevent them in the future." "Misunderstandings?" Veltar's voice became louder. "Your soldiers shoot first and ask questions later. Your colonies expand without care for others. Your ships attack anything that moves in space." Jake felt his anger rising, but he kept his voice calm. "Both sides have made mistakes. Both sides have lost people. That is why we are here, to stop the killing." The morning session continued like this. Each side blamed the other for the conflicts. Each side demanded things the other could not give. Jake began to wonder if peace was possible. The Cytherians seemed to hate humans. The humans feared the Cytherians. How could they find common ground? When the session ended for lunch, both sides went to separate rooms. Jake sat with his team and ate a simple meal. The food tasted like nothing. His mind was on the talks. "They do not trust us," Captain Roberts said. "Veltar acts like we are already at war." "Maybe we are," said Dr. Miller. "Maybe we have been at war for so long that we forgot how to make peace." Jake pushed his food around on his plate. "There has to be a way. We cannot keep fighting forever. Both sides will destroy each other." After lunch, Jake walked alone through the station corridors. He needed time to think. The talks were not going well. If they failed, the war would continue. More people would die. More worlds would burn. He found himself in an observation deck, looking out at the stars. Space was so big, so empty. There was room for everyone. Why did they have to fight over it? "The stars are beautiful from here." Jake turned around quickly. Veltar stood behind him. The Catherian had removed his armor and wore only a simple dark robe. Without the armor, he looked smaller, more like a person than a warrior. "Ambassador," Jake said. "I did not hear you come in." "I moved quietly for my size," Veltar said. He walked to the window and stood beside Jake. "On my world, we have a saying. The stars remember everything. They watch us fight and wonder why we are so foolish." Jake was surprised. The Catherian sounded almost sad. "In our language, we say that the stars are where we come from and where we will return. They are our home." "Yes," Veltar said. "We are all made of stardust." Human and Catherian both. They stood in silence for a moment, looking out at the endless space. Then Veltar turned to face Jake. His yellow eyes seemed different now, softer, more curious. "Commander Morrison," Veltar said, "may I ask you something?" "Of course." Veltar was quiet for a long time. He seemed to be thinking about something important. When he spoke, his voice was very soft. "Do you remember me, human soldier? Long ago in a skirmish ... You saved my life." Jake felt confused. He had never met this Catherian before today. He was sure of it. "I think you have me confused with someone else, Ambassador. We have never met." But as Jake looked into Veltar's eyes, something stirred. In his memory, something old and almost forgotten. A feeling that maybe, just maybe, they had met before. Veltar smiled, showing sharp white teeth. "Perhaps it is time I told you a story, Commander Morrison. A story about a young Catherian warrior and a human soldier who chose mercy over duty. A story that changed the course of 2 lives and may yet change the course of 2 civilizations." Jake's heart began to beat faster. Deep in his mind, old memories were starting to wake up. Memories of a distant world, a crashed ship, and a choice that seemed small at the time but might have been the most important thing he had ever done. "Tell me," Jake said. Veltar looked out at the stars again. "It was 15 years ago, on a world your people called Kepler 442b. We called it Vecmer, the place of deep stones. It was there that I learned what it truly means to be human." The battle had been raging for 3 hours when the ground began to shake. Princess Lyra felt the vibrations through her boots as she reloaded her rifle behind a crystal barrier. The Vorthic ground forces were retreating, leaving hundreds of their dead scattered across the valley floor. For the first time in months, the Zephyrians were winning a battle. "Princess, look up!" Major Veltoon shouted, pointing toward the sky. Princess Lyra looked up and felt her heart sink. A massive shape was descending through the clouds above them. It was a Vorthic bioship, larger than anything she had ever seen. The ship was 3 miles long and looked like a giant black whale covered in armor and weapons. As it came closer, she could see that its hull was pulsing like a living thing. "Command, this is Observation Post 7, came a voice over the radio. "We have a massive enemy vessel approaching from the north. It's huge." Captain Jake Morrison grabbed his binoculars and looked up at the descending ship. Even through the lenses, the vessel looked enormous. He had seen Zephyrian battleships before, but this thing made them look like toys. "Get me a tactical analysis," Jake ordered. "What are we looking at?" Dr. Rachel Stone was already scanning the ship with her instruments. Captain, it's definitely biomechanical, like the ground forces. But the energy readings are incredible. It's generating a power to run a small city. Weapons. Jake asked. I'm detecting multiple weapon systems, but they don't look like anything we've seen before. And Captain, there's something else. The ship is releasing some kind of gas into the atmosphere. Princess Lyra watched in horror as streams of green gas began pouring from the bioship's ventral openings. The gas spread quickly through the air, carried by the wind toward the crystal formations where her people were fighting. What is that gas? She asked into her radio. Dr. Stone's voice came back filled with alarm. Princess, get your people to higher ground immediately. That gas is converting the atmosphere. It's changing the chemical composition of the air itself. Converting it to what? Princess Lyra demanded. Something poisonous to your people. If this continues, the entire planet will become uninhabitable within hours. Princess Lyra felt a cold fear grip her heart. The Vorthik weren't just trying to conquer her world. They were trying to kill it. Even if her people won the ground battle, they would all suffocate when the atmosphere became toxic. All units, fall back to the highest crystal formations, she ordered. The air itself is becoming our enemy. Sergeant Danny Brooks was helping wounded soldiers when he heard the evacuation order. He looked up at the massive bioship and understood immediately what was happening. The Vorthik had brought their ultimate weapon. This is bad, he said to Corporal Maria Rodriguez, who was still in her sniper position. They're poisoning the whole planet. Can we stop it? Maria asked, not taking her eye off her scope. Danny studied the bioship through his binoculars. Maybe, if we could damage the atmospheric conversion system. But it's 3 miles up and protected by armor and energy shields. Nothing's too far. For the right rifle, Maria said grimly, on the command level of the bioship, the Vorthik commander known as Hive Lord Kefmer watched the battle below with satisfaction. The primitive projectile weapons had been a surprise, but it didn't matter now. In 6 hours, the planet's atmosphere will be converted to Type 7 combat gas, and every living thing on the surface would die. The Hive Lord turned to his second-in-command. Continue the atmospheric conversion. Deploy additional ground forces to accelerate the timeline. Yes, Hive Lord. But what of the projectile weapons? They are causing significant casualties. Irrelevant. Dead soldiers cannot breathe poisoned. Air. Continue the mission. Back on the ground, Princess Lyra had gathered her surviving commanders on the tallest crystal spire. From here, they could see the entire battlefield and the massive bioship hanging overhead like a dark cloud. How long do we have? She asked Dr. Stone. At the current rate of conversion, maybe 6 hours before the atmosphere becomes lethal. Less if they increase the output. General Keffer looked defeated. Princess, we should evacuate the planet. Get as many people as possible to the space stations. No, Princess Lyra said firmly. This is our home. There has to be a way to stop that ship. Jake was studying the bioship through a telescope. The atmospheric conversion systems are those large openings on the bottom of the ship. If we could damage them, maybe we could stop the process. But how? Major Velton asked. Our energy weapons can't reach that high, and the ship has shields anyway. Danny Brooks joined the group, carrying his rifle and a heavy pack. Actually, I might have an idea, but it's probably impossible. Tell us, Princess Lyra said. Danny pointed to a small opening on the underside of the bioship. It was barely visible, even through the telescope. See that intake valve? It opens and closes in a cycle, probably to regulate the gas flow. If someone could hit it with the right ammunition at exactly the right moment, it might cause the entire conversion system to overload. Jake looked at him incredulously. Danny, that target is 3 miles away and moving. It's the size of a dinner plate, and it's only open for a few seconds at a time. I know, Danny said calmly. Like I said, probably impossible. Dr. Stone was taking measurements. Even if someone could make that shot, they would need a specialized bullet. Something that could penetrate deep into the ship's systems and cause maximum damage. Chief Engineer Tony Martinez spoke up. I might be able to help with that. The Zephyrians have some interesting explosive materials. If I could modify a bullet with their plasma charges. How long would that take? Princess Lyra asked. 20 minutes, maybe 30. Princess Lyra looked at the green gas spreading across her world. Do it. Sergeant Brooks, do you really think you can make that shot? Danny looked up at the bioship, calculating distances and angles in his head. Princess, I've been shooting since I was 8 years old. My father always told me that every shot is possible if you understand the variables. Wind, gravity, target movement, bullet trajectory. But this is beyond anything you've ever attempted, Jake pointed out. Yes, sir, it is. But someone has to. Try. If that ship keeps poisoning the atmosphere, everyone on this planet dies anyway. Princess Lyra watched as Tony and some Zephyrian engineers worked frantically to create the special ammunition. They were taking apart energy weapon power cells and fitting the explosive charges into modified bullets. Sergeant, she said to Danny, what do you need from us? A clear shot from the highest point possible. No interference from energy weapons or radio transmissions. And someone to spot for me and call out the valve opening. I'll spot for you, Maria Rodriguez volunteered. We've worked together before. Danny nodded. Good. Maria, you'll need to track the ship's movement and predict when the valve will open. I'll have one shot, maybe two if I'm lucky. As Tony finished modifying the bullets, Princess Lyra realized that the fate of her entire world was about to depend on one human soldier making an impossible shot with a primitive weapon. 3 months ago, she would have laughed at the idea. Now, it seemed like their only hope. The bullets are ready, Tony announced. Each one contains enough explosive power to take out a city block. But Sergeant, you need to understand something. These bullets are unstable. If you miss and hit solid armor, they might not explode. You need to hit that intake valve precisely. Danny took the modified bullets and examined them carefully. They were heavier than normal ammunition and had a strange blue glow from the Zephyrian. Explosives inside them. Understood, he said. One shot, right on target. Princess Lyra looked up at the bioship. The green gas was spreading faster now, and she could see that some of the lower areas of the battlefield were already becoming uninhabitable. Her people were retreating to higher ground, but they were running out of places to go. Sergeant Brooks, she said quietly, my people have spent thousands of years believing that advanced technology is always better than simple solutions. You're about to prove us either very right or very wrong. Danny smiled as he checked his rifle one last time. Princess, sometimes the most advanced technology in the universe is a well-aimed shot. He took position on the highest crystal spire, with Maria beside him calling out wind readings and target information. 3 miles above them, the bioship continued its deadly work, unaware that one human marksman with an impossible shot was about to change the course of the war. 5 days later, the combined human and Zephyrian force stood at Crystal Falls, the last defensive position before the capital city of Zephyria Prime. The ancient crystal formations rose like giant spears from the ground, creating natural walls and towers that stretched for miles across the valley. Colonel Steve Parker stood on the highest crystal outcrop, watching the horizon through his binoculars. He was the commanding officer of the Earth Defense Force Marines, and he had fought in more battles than he could count. But he had never seen anything like what was coming toward them. Captain Morrison, he called into his radio. You need to see this. Jake climbed up to Steve's position and took the binoculars. In the distance, a black wave was moving across the landscape. It looked like a living carpet of darkness flowing toward them. As it got closer, Jake could see individual shapes in the mass. The Vorthik were coming, and there were thousands of them. My God, Jake whispered. There are so many of them. Down in the valley, Princess Lyra was moving between the defensive positions, checking on her newly trained soldiers. She wore human-style combat armor now instead of her royal robes, and she carried a rifle slung across her back. Her silver eyes were bright with determination. "How are your soldiers holding up?" she asked Major Velton, who was commanding a section of the line. "They're nervous, Princess," Major Velton admitted. "Most of them have never seen the Vortic up close, and they're still not completely comfortable with these human weapons." Princess Lyra picked up one of the rifles and checked it expertly. Danny Brooks had taught her well during the past 5 days. "The weapons will work, Major. We've tested them over and over. The bullets will punch through Vortic armor like it's made of paper." "I know, Princess." But knowing something and believing it are two different things. Princess Lyra understood. Her people had used energy weapons for so long that holding a ballistic rifle felt strange and primitive. But she had seen what bullets could do to Vortic armor. She believed in these simple human weapons. On the eastern side of the valley, Corporal Maria Rodriguez was setting up her sniper position. She was the best long-range shooter in the Earth Defense Force, and she had been given the most important job in the battle. Her rifle was specially modified to fire armor-piercing bullets at extreme range. "How's the wind?" asked her spotter, Private Ben Foster. Maria checked her instruments. "Light breeze from the northeast. Shouldn't affect the shots too much." She looked through her scope at the approaching enemy. "Ben, are you seeing this? Those things are huge." Through the scope, she could see individual Vortic warriors. They were even more terrifying up close than in the pictures. 8 feet tall, covered in black armor that seemed to move and breathe. Their red eyes glowed like hot coals, and their claws could probably cut through steel. "Maria, don't let them get in your head," Ben said. "They're just targets. Big, ugly targets." Maria smiled grimly. "You're right, and I've been shooting targets since I was 12 years old." In the command bunker, Captain Morrison was coordinating with General Keffer. The Zephyrian general looked worried as he watched the tactical display. "Captain, we're outnumbered 10-1, General Keffer said. "Are you sure this plan will work?" "General, we've beaten worse odds before," Jake said with more confidence. Then he felt, "Your soldiers have been training hard. They know how to use the weapons. And we have something the Vortic don't expect." "What's that?" "Surprise. They've been fighting energy weapons for months. They have no idea what's about to hit them." Lieutenant Kevin Johnson was with his assault team in the forward trenches. His soldiers were a mix of humans and Zephyrians, all armed with automatic rifles and machine guns. The Zephyrian soldiers looked nervous, but they held their weapons correctly and kept their eyes on the approaching enemy. "Listen up," Kevin called to his mixed squad. "When they get close, wait for my signal. Short, controlled bursts. Aim for center mass. Don't waste ammunition." One of the Zephyrian soldiers, Corporal Nextar, raised his hand. "Lieutenant, what if the bullets don't work? What if we're wrong about their armor?" Kevin looked at the young alien soldier. He could see the fear in his silver eyes. "Corporal, I've seen those bullets punch through 3 inches of steel. Vortic armor is tough, but it's not tougher than our ammunition." "But they're so big," Corporal Nextar said. "And there are so many of them." "Size doesn't matter if you can't stop a bullet," Kevin said firmly. "Trust your training. Trust your weapon. And trust the humans standing next to you." The Vortic were getting closer now. Jake could see them clearly without binoculars. They moved in perfect formation, like a swarm of giant insects. Their armor gleamed in the sunlight, and Jake could hear a low humming sound coming from their ranks. "All units, this is command," Jake spoke into his radio. "Enemy contact in approximately 10 minutes. Remember, energy weapons first to disrupt their sensors, then ballistic weapons to finish them. Conserve your ammunition and stay in your assigned positions." Princess Lyra was crouched behind a crystal formation with a squad of palace guards. She checked her rifle one more time and looked at the soldiers around her. These were the same warriors who had called human weapons primitive just 5 days ago. Now they were trusting their lives to those primitive weapons. "Princess," said Captain Zorthek, the officer who had complained about training with human weapons, "I owe you an apology, and I owe the humans an apology." "What do you mean?" Princess Lyra asked. "I was wrong to call their weapons primitive. I've been watching them prepare for this battle. The way they clean their rifles, the way they count their ammunition, the way they plan every shot. There's nothing primitive about it. It's just different." Princess Lyra smiled. "Captain, I learned something important from Sergeant Brooks. He told me that the best weapon is the one that works. It doesn't matter how advanced it is or how pretty it looks. If it stops your enemy, it's a good weapon." The Vorthik were only a mile away now. Jake could see their individual faces through his binoculars. They had no expressions, just cold mechanical purpose. Their red eyes swept back and forth as they scanned for threats. "All energy weapons, open fire," Jake commanded. The valley erupted in light as hundreds of Zephyrian energy weapons fired at once. Plasma bolts and laser beams cut through the air, striking the advancing Vortex formation. But just as expected, the enemy armor began to adapt. The energy weapons that had been deadly a few seconds ago were now barely scratching the Vortex. "Energy weapons, cease fire," Jake ordered. "All ballistic weapons, you are free to engage." Maria Rodriguez centered her crosshairs on a Vorthik commander at the front of the formation. The creature was larger than the others, with more elaborate armor. She took a deep breath, held it, and squeezed the trigger. The armor-piercing bullet struck the Vorthik commander in the center of his chest. The creature stumbled, looked down at the hole in his armor, and fell backward. Around him, other Vorthik warriors stopped advancing and stared at their fallen leader. "Target down," Maria reported calmly. "They definitely don't like bullets." All along the defensive line, human and Zephyrian soldiers opened fire with their ballistic weapons. The sound was incredible, hundreds of rifles and machine guns firing at once, creating a wall of noise that echoed off the crystal formations. The effect on the Vorthik was immediate and devastating. Creatures that had shrugged off energy weapons were falling by the dozens as bullets punched through their armor. The perfect formation began to break apart as the survivors tried to figure out what was happening to them. "They're confused," Princess Lyra observed. "They don't understand why their armor isn't working." The Vorthik tried to adapt their armor to the new threat, but there was nothing to adapt to. The bullets were just chunks of metal moving at high speed. There was no energy signature to analyze, no frequency to counter. Physics was physics, and kinetic energy was kinetic energy. But the Vorthik were not cowards. After the initial shock, they regrouped and began charging toward the defensive positions. They were taking heavy casualties, but they kept coming. There were just so many of them. "Here they come," Kevin Johnson shouted to his squad. "Remember your training. Aimed fire. Make every shot count." The battle was just beginning, but already the humans had proven their point. Sometimes the old ways really were the best ways. The question now was whether they had enough ammunition to stop an entire army. Princess Lyra raised her rifle and took aim at an approaching Vorthik warrior. The creature was running directly toward her position, its red eyes fixed on her. She could see the surprise in those eyes when her bullet punched through its armor and sent it tumbling to the ground. "Primitive weapons," she said with a smile. "I think I'm beginning to like primitive weapons."